There is a difference between cutting a perennial and knowing where its next flower comes from. A pair of sharp shears will do either job, but only one gives you a second bloom. I learned that during a winter of nursery piecework. We were paid by the row, so quick hands made the money. I cut one run of young stock right down into old wood because it looked neat and let me keep moving. The foreman said nothing that day. In June, he walked me along the same row. Every plant was alive and not one had flowered. He did not need a speech. 100 yards of green silence was enough. So these are 10 perennials you can cut for another flush with the correct height, the last safe date, and the plants you must leave alone. The calendar matters as much as the secateurs. A sound cut made too late is still the wrong cut. Now then, 4 things before the 10, because the timing is doing most of the work. The first is the deadline, and it is real. You need 6 to 8 weeks of growing weather after you cut for the plant to make new growth, form buds, and open them. Count back from your average first frost. If your first frost is mid-October, you want this done by about the middle of August. Late September frost, do it in the first days of August. If your first frost is November or later, you have until the end of August comfortably. Cut too late and you get exactly the worst outcome. The plant makes soft new growth, spends energy on it, and the frost takes it before a single flower opens. You have cost the plant a chunk of its winter reserves and got nothing for it. If you are past your window, do not cut. Leave the plant standing, let it go to seed, and put it on the list for next year. The second is that the plant has to be healthy enough to do it. A second flush costs energy. A vigorous, established clump has that in reserve. A plant that has been struggling all season, or one you put in this spring, does not. So do not do this to anything in its first year. Do not do it to anything that has been sitting in dry ground all August with wilted leaves. Water it well for a week first if you are unsure, then decide. The third is that you water and you do not feed. Water thoroughly right after you cut and keep it watered while the new growth is coming. You have just asked the plant for a burst of growth and growth needs water. But do not reach for the fertilizer. Nitrogen in August pushes soft growth that will not harden before frost, and that is a different problem you do not want. The plant has the resources already. What it needs from you is water and time. The fourth is how to make the cut, and it matters more than people think. Cut just above a set of leaves or a leaf joint, not in the middle of a bare stem. The plant regrows from the buds sitting in that leaf axil, and a stub of bare stem above it just dies back and rots. Use something sharp. Shears for the mat-forming plants where you are taking the whole thing over in one sweep, secateurs for anything where you are choosing each cut. A blunt blade crushes the stem rather than cutting it, and a crushed stem is an open door for disease. And clean the blades between plants if anything looks diseased. There is a fifth thing, and it is the name for what we are doing, because you will run into it and the terminology confuses people. There are 3 different jobs here, and they get muddled together. Deadheading is taking off individual spent flowers as they go over, a few at a time, all season. Small, continuous, and it stops the plant setting seed one flower at a time. The cutback, what the English call the Chelsea chop when it is done in late May, is shearing a whole plant back by a third or a half at once, to delay flowering or to force a second flush. That is most of what this video is about. And hard pruning is cutting a plant to the ground. That is only appropriate for a handful of things and only at the right moment. And doing it to the wrong plant in August is how people kill perennials. They are not interchangeable and the plant tells you which it wants. A plant that flowers on individual stems from a crown, like geum, wants deadheading down to the base. A plant that flowers all over a mound, like coreopsis or veronica, wants shearing. A plant that has collapsed entirely, like spiderwort, wants the ground treatment. If you are not sure which, shear a third off and see what happens. A third is almost never wrong, and it is always recoverable. Now then, the 10. First, Delphinium, the tall spires, blue, white, or purple, that are the backbone of a June border, and then leave a great hole in it in July. Once the main spike has faded and the lower florets have dropped, cut that flower stem right down to the base of the plant. Not halfway, all the way down, into the crown, so no stub is left standing. Leave the basal foliage alone. That green rosette at the bottom is what feeds the regrowth. Water it well and feed it lightly. This is the one exception on the list, and only if you are cutting in early August with plenty of season left. Delphinium is a hungry plant, and it is being asked for a lot. You will get a second set of spikes in September, shorter than the first and fewer, and worth having because there is very little else that shape in a September border. Second, veronica. Spike speedwell. Narrow, upright spikes of blue, pink, or white over neat, low foliage, flowering from June. When the spikes go brown from the bottom up, shear the whole plant back by about a third to a half. You are cutting into leafy growth, not to the ground. It is one of the most reliable rebloomers here. New spikes within 3 weeks, and often a third round after that if you cut again. Where the job goes wrong is deadheading spike by spike. It takes an hour, it looks fussy, and the plant reblooms better from one clean shear across the whole thing because the growth comes evenly rather than in dribs. Royal Candles is the one that reblooms hardest. Third, coreopsis, tickseed. Yellow, gold, or pink daisies on wiry stems, and it flowers itself into exhaustion if you let it. Shear the whole plant back by about a third once the flowering thins out. With the threadleaf sorts, moonbeam and its relatives, you can be more brutal. Take it down by half and it comes back as a tight, fresh mound. The mistake here is the opposite of most on this list. People do not cut it because it still has a few flowers on it, and they wait until it has none at all. By then, it is late. The plant has put its energy into seed, and the second flush is thin. Cut it while it still looks half decent. That is the hard part. Fourth, scabious, pincushion flower. Lavender blue or white pincushion heads on long, thin stems, and it is one of the longest flowering things you can grow if you keep on top of it. This one you deadhead rather than shear, and you do it continuously, every few days through the season, cutting each spent head right down to the base of its own stem where it meets the foliage. Do that and it flowers from June to frost without needing a hard cutback at all. Stop for 3 weeks in July and it sets seed and stops, and then you do need to shear the whole thing by a third to restart it. Butterfly blue is the standard and it is genuinely good. Fifth, gaura, whirling butterflies. Airy wands of small pink or white flowers that move in any breeze over loose foliage. In a good year, it flowers from June until frost with no help at all, but by August it often goes leggy and sprawls out from the center, with all the flower at the tips of long bare stems. Cut the whole plant back by a third to a half. It comes back tighter and it flowers again into October. One warning, gaura is not reliably hardy in the colder zones, and a hard cutback late in the season makes it less so. In Zone 5, either do this in early July or not at all, and leave the top growth on through winter for protection. Sixth, campanula, bellflower. Blue or white bells, and there are plenty of them. Clustered, peach-leaved, Serbian, the low creeping sorts. For the upright kinds, cut the flowered stems right down to the basal foliage once they have gone over. For the low spreading kinds, shear the whole mat over by half. Both come back with a second flush in September, and the foliage in the meantime looks fresh rather than tired, which is worth the 4 minutes on its own. The peach-leaved bellflower is the most reliable rebloomer of the tall ones. Seventh, and this is the one I warned you about, Penstemon, beard tongue. Tubular flowers on upright stems in red, pink, purple, or white, loved by hummingbirds, and it will rebloom well if you cut it right. Here's the trap. Penstemon builds a woody base as it ages, like a small shrub. Cut back into that old brown wood and nothing regrows from it, because there are no dormant buds in there to break. You get a dead-looking stump and a plant that never recovers. So cut to green, always. Take the spent flower stems down to where you can see green growth and leaves, and stop there. Usually that means taking off the top third and no more. The reason people get it wrong is that cutting lower looks tidier. A stem cut low sits neatly among the foliage. A stem cut at 2/3 height leaves a slightly awkward-looking plant for a fortnight. The tidy cut is the fatal one, and do not cut Penstemon down in autumn at all. Those stems protect the crown through winter. That is a March job. Eighth, geum, avens. Round flowers in hot orange, scarlet, or apricot on wiry stems above a low mat of scalloped leaves, flowering from May. Cut the flowered stems right down to the base of the plant, into the leafy mound once they have finished. The foliage stays and looks perfectly good. Totally Tangerine is the one that reblooms most reliably, and it will flower on and off from May to October if you keep cutting the spent stems out. Where the job goes wrong is shearing the whole plant, including the foliage. Geum regrows its flower stems from the crown, and the leaves are what powers that. Take the stems, leave the leaves. Ninth, astrantia, masterwort. Pincushion flowers surrounded by a papery collar of bracts in white, pink, or deep wine red, on stems above deeply divided leaves. It is a shade-tolerant plant, which makes it useful where most of this list is not. After the first flush, cut the whole plant down hard, flower stems and foliage together, right down to about 3 inches. That sounds severe, and it is the right treatment. It throws a complete new set of clean leaves within a fortnight and a second flush of flowers in September, and the new foliage is a great deal better looking than the tired old set you removed. Keep it watered while it regrows. Astrantia will not do this if it is dry. 10th, spiderwort, Tradescantia. 3-petaled flowers in purple, blue, or white over strappy arching foliage, each flower lasting 1 day and a new one opening the next. By midsummer, the whole plant collapses. The foliage goes yellow, the stems fall outward, and it looks properly awful. So awful that people dig it out. Cut the entire plant to the ground, 2 or 3 inches, everything. It comes back within 3 weeks as a fresh green mound and flowers again through September, and there is no better example on this list of a plant that looks finished and is not. Water it after you cut. That is the only condition. Before the warnings, a word on what a second flush actually costs the plant, because I do not want to sell you this without the other side of it. You are spending reserves. The energy for that September flowering comes out of what the plant would otherwise have banked for winter, and there is no free lunch in a garden. For a strong, established clump in decent ground with water, that is a fair trade, and the plant is back to full strength by spring. It is doing something it is well capable of. For a weak plant, a new plant, or a plant in poor, dry soil, it is not a fair trade, and you can genuinely weaken something into its second winter by asking too much of it 2 years running. So the rule I would give you is this: cut back the vigorous ones every year without a thought. Cut back the marginal ones every other year, and leave anything that struggled this season completely alone. Let it seed, let it bank, and come back to it next August when it is stronger. That is not caution for its own sake. I have seen borders where somebody cut everything back every year for 4 years running and slowly turned a good collection of plants into a thin one, and could not work out why. One more group, quickly, because they take the same treatment and you almost certainly have at least one. There are 3 plants I have covered elsewhere on this channel that belong on this list, and that I will not go over again in detail here. Catmint, shear the whole thing by half after the first flush and it flowers again into October. It is possibly the most reliable rebloomer in the garden. Salvia, the upright sorts, cut back to green, never into the woody base, exactly as with the Penstemon. Same rule, same trap. Hardy geranium, cut the whole plant to about 2 inches when it goes leggy in July. It comes back tighter and often flowers again. All 3 are covered properly in other videos. I mention them because if you have them and you are out there with the shears anyway, they are 4 more minutes well spent. Now for what not to do this to, because the wrong plant cut in August costs you next year. Do not cut back anything that flowers on wood it made this year for next year's display. On a border scale, that mostly means you leave your hydrangeas alone entirely. Big leaf and oak leaf hydrangeas are forming next June's buds right now, and every cut takes them off. Do not cut back peonies, hellebores, or bearded iris. Peonies and hellebores need their foliage until it dies down naturally. Iris need theirs to feed the rhizome. Do not cut back anything you want seed heads from: coneflower, sedum, ornamental grasses, teasel. Those brown heads are the winter structure of a border, and the birds work them from November onward. Cutting those is a March job. And do not cut back anything you actively want to seed itself about: sweet rocket, foxgloves, aqualegia, forget-me-not. Cut those and you have removed next year's plants. And there is a version of this you do in May rather than August that is worth knowing about, because it solves a different problem. If you cut a plant back by a third in late May or early June, before it has flowered at all, you do not get a second flush. You get rain flowering, later and shorter and sturdier. That is the answer for anything that grows too tall and falls over. Instead of staking it, you shorten it before it starts. The plant branches from where you cut, so it comes back bushier with more flower stems, each of them shorter and stiffer, and it flowers 2 or 3 weeks later than it otherwise would. Sedum, helenium, aster, phlox, and rudbeckia all take it well. Anything that flops in July is a candidate. The best trick is to cut only half the clump, the front half, or every other plant in a run. The uncut half flowers on time and tall at the back. The cut half flowers later and shorter at the front, and you get 5 or 6 weeks of flowering out of one plant instead of two. That takes some nerve the first time you do it, taking shears to a healthy plant in May that has done nothing wrong. Do it to one and leave the rest, and decide in August whether you were right. 2 more things worth knowing. The second flush will be smaller. I mean to be straight about that. Fewer flowers, shorter stems, and on some of these a slightly paler color. It is a genuine second season, and it is not a repeat of June. What it gives you is flower in September, when a border usually has almost none, which is worth more than the same quantity would be in July. And the plants will be better next year for it. A plant that has not set seed has not spent that energy, and a plant cut back in August goes into winter with fresh young foliage rather than a dying mess. Both of those show up the following spring. One last thing, on the habit rather than the plants. Get in the way of walking round the garden with secateurs in your pocket. Almost everything on this list works better as a 5-second job done 20 times than a 20-minute job done once. A spent stem cut the day it goes over is a stem that never gets the chance to start setting seed, and the plant never stops flowering in the first place. The people whose borders look good in September are not doing anything clever. They are carrying secateurs. Go out this evening and find the perennial that has finished, flopped open, and made the border look tired. Check that it is on this list and that you still have 6 growing weeks. Then make the correct cut, water it once, and leave it alone. Do not shear everything because the bed looks untidy. A second bloom is earned plant by plant, at the right joint and on the right date. Tell me your first frost date and which plant you cut. Timing changes the answer, and it will help another gardener decide whether there is still enough season left. Fast hands remove growth. Good hands know what growth to leave.